Welcome back to Just Chattin', and this is the series of videos we do on Thursday and Sunday evenings just for our own entertainment. So for all you Audie fans, he is in the room with me. He's sitting over on the other side on his new chairs because the novelty hasn't worn off yet. And he's a cat, he's easily amused anyway. But he has been photobombing the videos quite a bit over the last week or so. And I think it's because he's in the room, sleeping, I think, while I am filming. So consequently, he hears what's going on. And of course, he has a mother's ear for a camera. He has that in common with Nutmeg. And, who knows? It could be that's why he dislikes her so, because they're competing for the same real estate. It's like, ooh, camera, me. Yeah, I can understand it with a stupid cat, but a grown woman, hard to justify. Anyway, we are going to take a quick look at the intro, and we will be right back. So let's start off with Nutmeg, because she apparently made her debut, and that is exactly how the media is describing it, for Paris Fashion Week at the Balenciaga show. I don't know what they're trying to say. Is she a debutante? Are they trying to present her as some 17-year-old girl going to the debutante cotillion, which just announces to the world that they're old enough to be dating? What? Ordinarily, when someone throws the word debut into a sentence including Paris Fashion Week, it's something like Iman debuting on a runway for a certain designer. And that is newsworthy. If you follow fashion, the major models going out onto the runway for a certain designer at a certain show can be a very big deal. Well, especially if you're like a serious major model like Iman, or, who are the others? Jean Shrimpton. I'm aging myself, Twiggy. But no, Nutmeg wasn't on the runway. Or you might say Dior is debuting a new line. Well, she's not a fashion designer either. All of these articles were almost word for word the same. I think I've got 3 or 4 of them in the video notes. Feel free to compare for yourself, and you will see, and I've pointed this out on a couple of other videos, that these puff pieces are almost word for word identical. They're not stories, they're not written by the people who are credited on the byline. These have been written by a public relations agency, handed off to the publication. The publication tweaks it a little, sometimes not even a little, because, trust me, take a look at the headlines. And they say, oh, look, we wrote the story. No, you didn't. And these media outlets, People Magazine, in fact, is the big one for this, are virtually acting as Nutmeg's, I was going to say unpaid public relations agency, but I have no idea if they are being paid. They may well be getting something in return for doing this. I don't know. But obviously we have Nutmeg Fashion Week, and as always, her clothing was literally dragging on the floor. I don't understand why any fashion designer is giving her anything, because quite frankly, 10 minutes later, it's filthy, it's ruined, it's dragged on the floor. I'm surprised she hasn't yet tripped over her hems because of the way she does this. Now, part of the problem, of course, is Nutmeg is not a tall woman. She's not like Catherine, just this big statuesque brunette. Well, I suppose that's the least of the wonderful things you could say about Catherine. But certainly Catherine is not going to be tripping on her hems because her clothing fits her properly. Nutmeg, and I do not know how tall she is. I have seen everything from 5'2" to 5'6". And I don't care enough to pursue it any further than that. But she is not a model tall woman. Consequently, the clothing she wears, which has probably been designed for runway models, many of whom are even taller than Catherine, who is, well, she is very tall to begin with. So, of course, they're dragging on the floor. Of course they are. And I am just surprised that she would show up looking like an unmade bed for the shows at Paris Fashion Week. But be that as it may, that's her problem, not mine. The best video I have seen on this, by the way, is from the Royal Grift. She is looking at this from a rather different perspective than I am. And believe me, I don't mind sending people her way. She did a lot of work on the behind-the-scenes stuff, and she shows video. Nutmeg, according to these articles, showed up in order to show support for Pierpaolo Piccioli, who is now in charge of Balenciaga. And, of course, these public relations puff pieces were saying they had collaborated in the past. It's like, what? Nutmeg is not a fashion designer. She can't collaborate with a genuine designer. Or maybe they're thinking in terms of, like, social media influencer collaborations, which simply means I'll advertise for you. I certainly hope so, because no legitimate artistic collaboration could be going on. This guy is so far out of her league. Well, she's not a designer to begin with, but even if she thinks she is a designer, even she would have to recognize the fact that this guy is out of her league. Regardless, the Royal Grift showed the film footage of Pierpaolo walking right past Nutmeg, not even looking at her. So that certainly tells you exactly how valuable the collaboration was in his eyes. But again, this is going back to the Royal Grift's information. She shows very clearly that Nutmeg was not invited with the A-listers. She was not someone, like Halle Berry, who was expected to be there and got special seating and special photo ops and so on. No. Apparently, she just showed up, wandered in, and had to kind of create her own photo op. Though heaven knows, she's not shy about doing that. And then when everything was all over and everyone was leaving, and of course the designer is walking out, Nutmeg had what has to be the most awkward kiss moment with him. It looked like something out of a Charlie Chaplin movie. And if you have no other reason to watch the Royal Grift's video, watch it for that. Because I really expected one of the two of them, maybe both, to walk away from that encounter with a broken nose. You can tell these people were totally uncomfortable in each other's space. So, no. I think that whole nonsense of she showed up to show support for her pal, new Balenciaga director, Pierpaolo Piccioli. No. She wouldn't have been that awkward if they had any kind of relationship. This was the meeting of total strangers. So yeah, I gotta wonder what they're trying to portray with this. However, I do have some ideas. So let's get into the Wayback Machine, and we're not going that far. About a month. Remember the Bloomberg interview with, Emily Chang? And at some point in this interview, which was a horror show to begin with. Yes, I watched the entire thing. It was unwatchable. But at one point in there, and of course, I see Nutmeg at Fashion Week, and immediately my mind goes back to this. At one point, Emily is asking her this sort of what's next question. Well, here's Nutmeg's answer.
I'm open to the possibilities of what can happen, certainly in the expansion of As Ever. I would not put beauty or fashion out of the mix. I think those are things that people associate with me, and it's categories that I really love.
Yeah, because she really is associated with beauty and fashion in everybody's mind. No, she's associated with wrinkled clothes that are dragging in the gutter. That's what people think when they think Nutmeg and fashion. She seems to believe that she is a fashion and beauty icon. The delusion is deep with this one. I think what we are seeing, contrary to other speculation, is something she put out to the public in that interview. This is where she is planning to go next. Now, she's reinvented herself hundreds of times. Well, that's a slight exaggeration. But it wouldn't be a slight exaggeration to say she has reinvented herself at least a dozen times. That's not an exaggeration. I can stand by that one. So now she's going to reinvent herself as a beauty and fashion icon. This is the newest version of Nutmeg. Now, the problem with this, of course, is the reason there are so many different versions of Nutmeg is because there's just nothing there to begin with. This is not a three-dimensional human being. This is someone who is modeling on what other people do. She copies, she takes a page from this book, a page from that book. And I've talked about this recently when we discussed her relationship with Jessica Mulrooney. Nutmeg decides she wants to be a social media influencer because Jessica Mulrooney was. It's one after another. And I think we are just seeing the most recent instantiation of who Nutmeg is pretending to be. Will we see more of this in the future? Oh yes, I think we will. I think this is something that very likely simply came out of that interview. Although, to be fair, since I believe she got the questions in advance, I believe it came out of the pre-interview prep when she learned that Emily Chang was going to ask her about this. And I think that's when she thought, hey, this is a great idea, because Nutmeg has never had an original idea in her entire life. So, yes, that's what I think is happening. However, to be fair, I want to throw out one of the other theories. And I do have an article mentioning this, again, in the video notes. Everything's all there. There was an article that said this may be a step into Europe. Step one of Nutmeg transitioning back to the UK, to the royal family. I don't think that is at all likely. I think even Nutmeg, who has an incredibly unrealistic view of her wonderfulness and how people should all be loving her and how we all do love her, even if we're just too jealous to admit it, I think she knows she's not welcome in the UK. I think that getting booed in the UK the last time she was there ended it for her. I do not think she will subject herself to that again. Now, I'm sure all our UK friends are going to agree with this. If she goes back to the UK, there will be more booing. Absolutely, there will be more booing. If she goes to Australia, if she goes to Canada, if she goes anywhere in the English-speaking world, with the possible exception of California, there will be booing. So is she planning to go back to the UK? Oh, I very much doubt it. Very much. I think even if they offered her the opportunity to be a working royal again, she would decline, because I'm pretty sure she knows what she's in for, and she didn't like that. So, do I think there's any merit to these stories that are coming out saying, well, she's in Paris today, she'll be in London tomorrow? No, I don't. I do not think the British people have anything to worry about in terms of Nutmeg going back. I think they have a lot to worry about in terms of Harry going back, but I do not think the lovely wife will be joining him. So, yeah, that's just my take on it, my opinion. And hey, I could be proven wrong. We'll see. I mean, this is one of those time will tell situations. But I would say two things coming out of this. One, no, it's not Nutmeg's first step back into the UK. It's like, we'll go to London via Paris. No, I don't think so. Two, I think what it really is Nutmeg's desire to go into the fashion world. And she has not successfully been able to do that. She was not able to get that Dior sponsorship she wanted. She desperately wants to be the face of a very big European design house. It hasn't happened yet. I don't think it's going to. Quite frankly, I think she's too controversial. And even though designers, Balenciaga in particular, are not strangers to controversy, I do think Nutmeg is too polarizing. I don't think anybody wants to run the risk that even though she may have a very vocal group of fans, oh, more on that later, that it's a very small group of fans and that most people really don't like her. And most people will bring that dislike and sprinkle it all over any other company she is associated with. So, do I think this is a plan? Absolutely not. Do I think it's her plan? Well, yes. That reality, common sense, practicality, they have no part in Nutmeg's plans. Her plans are nothing but self-delusion and wishful thinking. And I do believe that's what this is, self-delusion and wishful thinking. But I definitely think she wants to pivot into beauty and fashion, become the next Kardashian, which, quite frankly, oh God, isn't it sad? This woman had once been a member of the British royal family. She gave all that up so she could be a Kardashian wannabe. Oh, some people could screw up a free lunch. My father-in-law always used to say that. Some people could screw up a free lunch. Yep, Nutmeg wrote the book on that. So now we're going to take a look at what's up with the sock puppet, because he has not been idle. So after Harry left Sentebale, and this is the organization that everyone claims he founded, but let's face it, we all know that man could not found a children's lemonade stand on the street corner. No, this was founded for him by others. Palace staff, the men in gray he hates so much. Yeah, talk about bite the hand that feeds you. These were the very people that put together everything he ever had in his life. Every single scrap of good press, every single ounce of goodwill from the public came to him because those courtiers cleaned up after him. Yeah. I'm sorry, the ingratitude really irks me. But away from that, he left the organization in the wake of the disagreement he had with Sophie Chanduka. And I guess what he was thinking was that he would go away and the organization would collapse. Because, hey, if Harry's gone, how can they possibly survive without him? Yeah, didn't quite work out that way, and they were all prepared to carry on in his absence. Now, the charity certainly had a number of problems, and it's very hard, even looking at all of the information that has come out, to figure out who exactly was responsible for what. But now that Harry's gone, the organization is moving forward. They do seem to be having some trouble moving forward, and I will say that. And I have an article specifically about that in the video notes. Do I think this is because the organization is incapable of moving forward? Probably not. Do I think that there is some active sabotage going on? Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because it's very clear that Harry does not want the organization to thrive in his absence. So, the organization has made headlines because they are discontinuing these polo charity fundraisers. Well, good for them. A charity that is dealing with African children impacted by HIV, living in poverty, being funded by polo matches is just such a huge disconnect and gives off such a bizarre message to the public that I have to say I think this was sensible. Now, the polo matches, to be fair, did produce a large amount of donations, including a lot from Harry himself, and apparently the organization is acknowledging that. We're talking about $1 million he gave them, and other big donors. So they were getting huge amounts of money from a very tiny group of elites. And the question is, has the charity simply made a choice to walk away from that kind of funding? And maybe they have. I have not heard anything from Sentebale with regard to this. Most of what I'm hearing is being generated from Harry's side of the fence. So I would have to say, it seems very clear to me that there is another side, and we can all figure this out, and I've always said this. If you have questions, just employ your own common sense. A charity dealing with impoverished African children being supported by funds from polo matches that are appealing to that tiny percentage of elites. Yeah, you think maybe somebody said, whoa, I don't like the look of this. I do. I think that could be what's happened, and they're pivoting off to different funding sources. Interestingly enough, one of the articles that I've cited, and of course, again, they're all in the video notes, had mentioned that the Sussex Squad, Harry and Meghan's fan base, had given this charity $47,000. And, like, what, am I supposed to be impressed by that? Let us assume that they have a fan base of only 500 people. That's $100 a person. Come on. Really, that is just crazy. Why would anybody consider this to be a vast amount of charitable funds that they are sacrificing because they no longer have Harry there? I will grant you that to any one of us on the streets, $47,000 might be a large amount of money, might even be life-changing for some people. But for a large charity like this, no. It's probably pocket change. In fact, when the charity closed down their London office, that saved them somewhat over £500,000. So I would say, yeah, they're dealing in amounts of money that far exceed this. But I did find it very interesting that the article was citing the collective donations of Nutmeg and the Sock Puppets fan base. How strange is that? But it does tell you where the information is coming from, because who on earth would know these figures except Nutmeg and the sock puppet, right? The Sentebale charity isn't going to know, because the donations would be coming in from, Mary Smith and Tom Jones and whatever. So yeah, I am looking at this and I am seeing a certain coordination in the information that is coming out, and it does look like the Sussex camp is trying to smear Sentebale and somehow prevent them from getting on with their charitable work. If this is true, well, shame on them. And really, shame on them. But does it seem likely to me? Oh, yes, it does. This seems perfectly predictable for that spoiled brat man-child who, if he can't swim in the pool, he's perfectly happy to pee in it, so nobody else gets to swim in it either. I am just stunned by this. But I will say that if Sentebale is trying to broaden their donor base, which Sophie Chanduka has been saying for at least the last year that I am aware of, and because I am not aware of everything that goes on within that charity, it could be for much longer. She has been saying that she wants a broader donor base, not just a few high rollers. Now, obviously she has good reason for this, because she saw herself and frankly learned the hard way that if you have one or two major donors, think Harry, and they come to you for a favor, why don't you just make a public statement saying, my wife didn't bully you? You're kind of obligated to do that for them. You have to act as their PR machine, or they go home and they take their money with them. So she saw herself that this notion of a handful of very wealthy donors can tank your organization. And I think she's making the right call. And if they get off to a bit of a rocky start, oh well, I'm sorry for that, but I would hope in time the spoilt brat sock puppet would get over himself long enough to realize that snapping back at a charity is only hurting the recipients of that charity. It's not hurting anyone else. Oh, and it makes him look bad. I will say that. Makes him look bad, too. Because, yeah, this is what I'm seeing. That Sophie Chanduka got her fingers burned by one major donor and does not want to run the risk of going through this with that handful of other major donors, any one of whom could be knocking on her door at any moment, asking for a favor, with the unspoken threat of, we'll pull our funding if you don't do what we want. No charity can exist like that. If you exist like that, you're not a charity. You are simply the unpaid PR rep for whoever is throwing money your way. And that is a slippery, slippery slope. But Chanduka knows this. So let's wish her well, and we'll see how this one plays out. Okay, that is what I have for you today. We're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. And in the meanwhile, have a terrific day.